watch. But yeah, welcome to the very first Watercooler Hangout. I'm thrilled about this. Let's see here. Oh, did you just chat something out, Morgan?
I did. So we were just joking about like all these different kinds of things we run into in conference calls and
yeah.
This is something to share for all our onboarding hires. It's a YouTube video that is basically the typical things you would go through in a remote team or in a conference call of what happens. And I just thought it was relevant, so I thought I'd leave it there.
Perfect. A gem for us all to check out that we can all relate to, all the tech woes of remote work and connecting across. I mean, how many time zones do we even have here? Well, no, I'm truly excited and honored to have all of you today. In my note earlier, like I was saying, we're just going to spend a little bit of time first, obviously getting to know each other, a little bit about our backgrounds, and then the most important piece, talking and sharing through the biggest challenges that we're facing. And because this is the first one, I'm honestly not sure what will come of this. So in many ways, all of us here can sort of guide and direct what we want to get out of this time together. I think the reason why we at Know Your Company, Daniel and I, Daniel, who's our chief technology officer, we even started the water cooler, is because these sorts of connections just don't happen if you are a manager or a business owner. To be able to talk to peers who are running businesses and running teams from all over the world, it just doesn't really happen that much. So I'm excited to have all of you here, and yeah, feel free to, I don't know, just again, take this where you want it to be. It's yours to shape. So looks like we have Andrew who might be joining us here momentarily, which is awesome. So while he sort of gets settled in, so while he gets settled in, let's start off with introduction. So I'd love to hear first a little bit about yourself. So obviously your name, where you're calling in from, the company that you're a part of, your role, and then the two things that I'd love for you to share, or maybe three, is I guess first what you want to get out of this discussion here, or what you've been wanting to get out of the water cooler in general. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the biggest challenge that you've been sort of wrestling with lately as a leader or as a manager. What's just been the number one thing sort of on your mind that maybe you'd like to discuss today or have people talk about? And then the last thing, the most important question in my opinion, which is crunchy or smooth peanut butter, which do you prefer? That is the last question. So, like I said, a little bit about yourself, where you're calling from. Yeah. The second.
Let's make that a first answer.
Yeah, or I mean, you can do this in whatever order you want. The second being why you joined the water cooler, what you want to get out of this discussion, and the third thing being crunchy or smooth. So, who would like to start? Anyone can take the ball here.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Gentlemen first.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Right.
Voice first.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm Morgan. I was born and raised in. I work out of my home office. I have traveled extensively and lived in 5 different places. Back to Montreal 3 years ago. I work for Convert.com, which is an A/B testing tool. And we scrappy 100% remote multi-time zone team of my next hire 5. And we operate on a structure of governance called holacracy. So it is a distributed way of making decisions, essentially. I Convert, run HR. I've also started doing engagement with integration partners because I like people part of it. I'm also wear the hat of conscious business. Holacracy, you don't necessarily have a job, so I take on roles that suit my skill set and my interest of either what is or where I want to go. Right. My background is in interior design and project management, so tell people is I solve problems, I listen, and I solve problems, and I spent 20 years doing that with a wide variety of stakeholders for gut remodel construction projects, all the way from, you know, outsourced manual labor up to the end client. So it was kind of my intro into working with different teams, and I use those skills with the creative problem solving, do what I do on a daily basis. So it's been a ride in the time that I've been. It's been a lot of fun, actually. I think I've had 2 days where I kind of, in those 3 years, kind of threw up my hands, but mostly I have to say that I really love the values of the team. One of the first things that came up when I was first hired, I actually, then our framework was allowed to refuse a potential customer based on their values not aligned with us. So that had come out of a really awful working environment, and that to me kind of sealed the deal of how important aligning values and the culture of the team hiring was super, super important. So I've been on this journey, grown the company from 7 when I started to 35, and with all these different pieces and parts, really attract and grow engagement within the team. Like I see my role as being a service role, essentially, for people inside the team and people outside the team. So to really think in terms of operations, we're the grease in the wheels to keep everything moving. And we need to provide service to the people, but then those that are doing hiring and outside facing also have to think that way too, whether they're customers or whether they're people of jobs, there are customers too, right? Smooth peanut butter. So I prefer hazelnuts, I have to say, but peanut butter works for me. And I think is really, so there are a few. The challenge I have at this point is trying to maintain our growth without growing the team. Like, grow the team, but I don't want to have to grow as much as I've grown to get to the next jump of where we want to be financially. So that is a challenge for sure. And then also scaling our hiring process. Our hiring process is really blind. It's super, and I'm trying to deal with that challenge now. So that's the thing. I think has always been to learn from other people. I'm a true believer that you can, that a person can always learn something from no matter anybody. Whether I on the job laying pipe or, whether whoever it is, I can always learn something. And one of the reasons for the group initially, and I has absolutely exceeded every expectation that I ever had. So I'm here to, tap into your brains, as it were, and learn.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
That's all I have.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. It's good to know that you're on Team Smooth. And we're honored we're excited to be able to tap into your brain as well. So thank you. All right, who would like to go next? Go, whoever wants to go, you can just Start talking.
Yeah, let me try. Go ahead. Hi, I'm Vivek, Berlin, Germany, and for the last 2 years, I've been working with Zalando. Again, it's online retailer. I work as an engineering manager for basically managing the entire fashion store, the online fashion store. We're basically the Amazon for fashion in the Europe, and so I have different time zones. I just enjoy this because this reminds me of the days where we used to work with distributed teams, some in India, some in China, and it was an amazing experience. So this reminds me of those times when I work, like talk to different people in different time zones. I started as a long back, moved in different roles, basically thrown into leadership, saying that, hey, you can figure it out, just do it. And had amazing mentors over the course of my entire career. And I think brought me to Watercooler is basically just enjoy Watercooler, right? You get people, you hang around there and you just share information, sometimes gossip, which you can actually apply to your day-to-day work, and sometimes gossips that can be useful. So I think this is why I'm really interested to actually hear and tap into the minds of this collective minds of amazing people like all of you. And for me, I think that started into a journey about what does leadership mean and how to define leadership versus management. Being thrown into leadership without being much trained, being hands-on engineer, you need to pick up the skills as you go and as you learn through conflicts and different situations. So you pick up things that work, things that you, and also working different cultures. Like if you're working in the Eastern Europe or East Asia, then working in Middle East and India. So that really brings you different perspectives of how people respond to leaders. I had in South Korea for 5 years working with LG, and that was an amazing experience. How they leader and the model there, and then switch suddenly to the UK, where it's very frank, open. So it's jumping around models. Like really, you can actually build a catalog of these ideas. And now in my present job, so I work with a diverse team. I have almost people with me on a day-to-day job. Everyone coming from different backgrounds. Some German, some Indian, Russians, Chinese, from Turkey. So it's amazing. So like a melting pot of culture and also emotions that come with, and that's where it connects to me. As a single, at the moment, single number one challenge is basically trying to understand of how do you manage as a leader your emotions while making decisions. And as a leader, my job is basically to be able to help people bring out the best in their professional lives, because we solve complex customer problems. And how do I build the empathy for my customer, our customer among them? And the modern world is full of biases, full of complex changing equations, and that really puts you in a different situation because you're absorbing a lot of information. There's a short of information available to you. This creates a complex mess of bias. So when you deal with decisions need to be made, how do you ensure you're self-aware of what is the state that you bring into that decision making and what's the long-term effect of it. And I think this has been a kind of a search for myself for a long time on understanding how people deal with this in different professions, not in the profession just the way I'm currently in, understanding in different areas of life and professions that people make critical decisions. How do we keep their emotions into that? And I think as a human being, you have emotions. You need to ensure that's a first-class citizen in any decision. Take it out from that. So for me, I admire and promote in my team and everywhere I work to bring your best of yourself and the true your time. So that's the same reason I want to bring myself to my team with all my imperfections and the nuances. Yet I want to be in a place where understanding and contemplating on, okay, this is the right state of mind I need to jump into because this is what it demands of the situation is. And asking the right questions and ensuring the team understands that. And this is something, it's a work in progress. And I do that sometimes by journaling or just looking back in past major decisions I had to be part of, and how did I do, and what do you think about it? So doing a self retrospective about it. But it's a journey. That's where reading about the testimonials and how all of you contribute to the water cooler really gives me the perspective, thinking from your point of view on how would I apply to my day-to-day decision-making process. So again, thank you for having this amazing experience being with all of you, and I'm looking forward to connect and contribute.
Thank you so much, Vivek. We have to ask though, peanut
Good.
butter wise.
Crunchy peanut.
All right.
Crunchy peanut butter. I like crunchy one.
All right, 1-to-1 then. Got it. Thank you so much. We're really excited to have you. And I think your point about emotions being such a volatile thing to take into consideration when making decisions as a leader is something extremely worthwhile talking about. So I look forward to hopefully touching on that in the conversation. Thank you again. All right, who's up next? Who would like to
Sure.
introduce themselves?
I can go. So Tim, I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I am a GO. We're an outsourced employment service, so we employ people internationally for companies where they don't have an entity set up. Can't do it directly. Role in the company is historically been on the operations side of the business. So I deal with all the data, finance to me, technology reports to me, implementation, account management, all that stuff. The other founder deals with sales and service. So what brought me to the water cooler actually was I can't remember whether it was on Twitter or email or something, but I was getting articles that were really interesting to me as I started to become a manager of people as opposed to an individual contributor here as we started to grow in size. And I was reading these articles. I was like, oh, know your company. This is interesting. And then I got on the and then I realized that I kept clicking through to these things every month. So I started to look at more like what else could I learn, and so it's been very helpful for me as a way to learn. One of the biggest things that I discovered was as I moved being an individual to a manager to now I'm a manager of people who manage other people, is that that sort of startup trial and error, lean, let's just do the minimum we have to in order to get the result. It doesn't work well with people. And the collateral of, trial and error is horrific. It's realized that's really, it's something that it helps to be more thoughtful and to have a bit more tactical approach. So that I have currently, I have personal challenge and then I have the company challenge. So the company challenge is around embedding culture and values. So we're at 25 people now. And we feel like we're at a tipping point where our sort of organic culture that we being a small group that we all know each other isn't going to survive if we get to 30, 50, 100 people. We're a service business. So we're going to add, there's no way around that. So we need to have the structure in place in order to be able to scale in. And then as an individual, part of this is that I need to be able to espouse the values that I want the team to show. And I really want us to have a culture that's honest communication. And so feedback is a really hot topic. How do we communicate in a supportive way? How do we manage balance so that we're not always telling people off, but we're also praising them so that they don't switch off and to listen? And for me personally, being a better listener, I think is a really big part of that. Now, peanut butter, either way, to be honest. If I had to choose, I guess I'd go with crunchy. But you know, I'll take it anyway.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim. And now, yeah, 2-1 in Crunchy's favor, just keeping score here for this very, very important question. No, and I think the point you made about listening is absolutely key. I actually wrote something very recently on that topic because it's something important that I think we overestimate as leaders our ability to listen a lot of the time. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, who would like to go forward and introduce themselves next? Just go ahead and you can just start talking.
I have a newsletter I sent to freelance product designers, where I basically like find them their jobs for freelancers. It's got like 4,000 people on it. It's a very small operation. I was telling Tim and Morgan for the call that a bit earlier than the rest of you guys, I'm still one person team. I'm team Crunchy as far as the peanut butter goes. What brought me to the water cooler was just wanting, I guess, to grow beyond myself and expand my network a bit. In particular, I read a book, Peter Drucker. Now let's talk a bit, and I think that might have been part of the reason why I joined, was kind of realizing that managing yourself and managing is a lot of times kind of the key to getting better results for stuff, and kind of implementing systems kind of led me to some of Claire's awesome guides. And yeah, what I want to get out of the cooler is kind of, I'm definitely not at like a place yet where I can implement like everything directly into my business, because I don't have that sort of thing. But I think that like I can get mindset changes from people that are ahead of me ways, which has been tough for me because like I've been in masterminds with other people in similar situations, and you start to run into like the same problems often. Sometimes like it feels like the problems kind of migrate between us, and like just kind of off like whack-a-mole sort of style. So yeah, I also have a podcast on product design. I've interviewed some really cool people. That's been another way to kind of grow my network and change my mindset. So yeah, I think that's about it.
What's your podcast called?
It's called One Thing Pod.
All right.
Sweet. No, thank you so much for joining us, like Rob. Yeah, no, I think having the variety of perspective is so important, and you make a great point about how, for I think all of us as leaders, whatever stage that is, whatever stage of the business that is, the only way you leap forward is by being around people who are in a different place than you. So I think the variety of perspective is actually really important for all of us here to learn. So thank you. Who's next?
I can go next if that's cool.
Go for it. Yeah.
So lots of shared experience. I suppose really good to connect with you all and see some faces to the names that I've up in the various fora at the water cooler. It's really cool to be live with you guys. So really appreciative for you. Rob, I suppose I'm not too dissimilar to your situation in many senses. So I'm a two-person organization. So I left a management background, typically specialize in organization design or change management, sorts of people, strategy type issues is what I typically do. And I've done a number of years at PwC. So I think Watercooler was after going out by myself and starting my own consulting practice, it felt very, very lonely. So I went from a 250,000 people, really, really active sort of internal social network, had access to knowledge and really, really smart, switched on fingertips 24 hours a day. So I could reach out to our community and get answers to most of my questions pretty quickly and pretty satisfying. And I think I really didn't anticipate how much I would miss that after leaving such a big organization and starting out by my finding the water cooler was a bit of a godsend in some senses, because it allowed me to get some live feedback from other really, really smart people. And it also allowed me to, share whatever sort of knowledge that I think I have, or other people who are going through challenges that I've either seen before or experienced myself. So it was really cool for me. I think, Morgan, I was really interested to hear your background in interior design. Well, to judge, have a more obscure background than you. So I initially I went to university to train to become a religion, and through that process discovered somehow that I was much too irreverent for that lifestyle, and found my way to the dark underbelly of management consulting, and here I am, 7 or 8 years later, running my own and on our first sort of staff member, just to I think try and help me get some headspace and find my way through the chaos of owning a company and starting a company. So I think that brings me on to what my biggest challenge is at the moment, and there are two that sort of came to mind at your email. So one is really fortunate, coming from somewhere like PwC, I had a great network and was really fortunate to learn some work really, really quickly after starting. So I've got one client who's pretty much probably 95% of want more and more and more and more, and I recognize that that's actually quite a vulnerable place to be in as a business. So one is how to scale that from a one client or a couple of smaller clients to a couple of really a pipeline. And the second thing is and I think some people will have experienced this before, have experience with it, is differentiate or manage those people who go, hey, can I grab a coffee with you? And differentiate the ones that are going to be sort of mutually beneficial, or that could lead to a genuine opportunity to partner together, or a genuine opportunity to work together, compared to those who are doing to take, and you don't really get anything in return. And, I think there's definitely a place for that, but it's just, I feel like at the moment, because I'd say I've probably invested quite a bit of time into trying to raise my own profile over the past year since starting my business, like quite active on Medium. I also started a podcast. I just do sorts of quite a bit of speaking locally at conferences, things like that. And I think, there's a lot of people that want some time now, and it's just trying to differentiate how to give it in the best or the most appropriate way. I think that's the thing. And I'll wrap up by saying I am firmly in the Team Crunchy pack.
I think I need to go.
You're outnumbered here, Morgan, for now. All good. We still got a few folks left though, so we'll see how this shakes out. Johnny, thanks so much for sharing. Very, very excited to have you with us here. So we've got, I think, two folks left to introduce themselves along with myself, and love to hear from either Prabodh or Andrew.
I can go next. Can I go, Andrew?
Absolutely, go for it. Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm from Bangalore, so get Recruiter Box. So we build an ATS, applicant tracking system. So Morgan, it might help you in some of your problems. So our engineering team is based out of India, and our other functions work out of US. So we also have this time zone issue. Like they work of Pacific and Western time zone. So our engineering team has been always based out of India. So I've been in contributor for long. Like I've been working here from last close to 4 years. So first 3 years I work in different projects, and from last 1 year my responsibilities include mostly making sure stuff in engineering and overall responsible for the delivery of the team and each individual's contribution, things like that, right? So I think it's a holocracy in, so our each function, let's say sales and engineering, work in their different management philosophies. So I think in engineering we work with this holocracy philosophy. It's more of a role at your what you're currently playing than probably I don't have a designation which is like a design. Like we work with for this project I'm playing this responsibility, so I'm taking up this responsibility for this project, right? So it sort of worked out well for us. Yeah, coming to I've been an engineer for probably like last 11 to 12 years. So I've been mostly working in as a product designer, product developer, long part of my career, and I was working. So how I came into management was I was one of the co-founders of my previous company, where we were 3 founders, and we had to grow the team to probably a team of 25 then, and eventually we had to make a set of and define the vision for the team and things like that. Then after that, I moved on to a different opportunity at Recruiter Box, where joined as an individual contributor, but eventually moved to this specific role I'm playing. Coming to the one thing which keeps me busy or nights is the making sure that everybody in the team is excited about coming to work every day. I think it's a sort of understated problem, but I think last night my son was asking when is the morning going to come. He's so excited about mornings, right? But I don't know if entire team is excited about as like mornings. So that's my number one problem always. And being a small team, probably we are a team of 11 or 10. So even the positive or negative, whatever it is, it just is very. So I just want to make sure we always amplify the positive things. That's the major part of my responsibility goes. Yeah. I am also on the team side. I don't mind any of them. I actually love biryani. So anything else is just yeah.
Go for the smooth one.
Yeah. Okay. Join the smooth one. I like the minority. So
just to even things out.
Sympathy.
Oh, awesome.
I was just going to say that I'm firmly in the smooth category, so I don't know where that puts the votes. But if I could put 2 votes in for smooth, I would. Definitely my touch. So,
evening out a little bit. It's evening out a little bit. Well, Andrew, yeah, we'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Andrew Montelenti. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Parsley. To give a quick summary, Parsley is a software company that sells media analytics to large-scale brands, publishers, news companies, online video companies, and all sorts of other folks. We're kind of like a middle-aged startup, so we're fiscal year of operation. And we have about 70 people on staff. That spans distributed team, been fully distributed remote since the beginning. And it spans about 30 people in engineering, product, and design, which is the team I run, CTO. And then we have about 40 people on a business team, like kind of business department that spanning sales, customer success, finance, operations, and areas like that. And that's the team my founder runs, although that is not strictly true anymore. We kind of manage some departments together and stuff. But so yeah, I guess well, I guess why I joined the water cooler is just because I generally find that, you know, I'm personally like man type, so I write a lot, I read a lot. I think I actually just tallied that I've read like 18 business books in the last 6 months, and like, write like a of content just for myself that then I just shred and throw away. So I find that I'm a little bit too in my own head, and it's good to like hear from other people's perspectives of how they're approaching problems. And I guess in terms of challenges, that's right, like challenges that we're seeing now, probably like so scaling has always been kind of part of the history. We had like a up and to the right scaling path over the course of 10 years. Like I think that, the head count that we're at now, which is like 70 people. If you had asked me 5 years ago if a company would ever have 70 people, I would have said, hell no, that would be terrible. Should never get to 70 people. That's way too many. No one will like know each other anymore or whatever else. But we've sort of just like steadily grown to that size over time as revenue has gone up and funding and all the rest of that. And I'm not too worried about culture. I think actually we nailed a lot of cultural aspects at Parsley pretty well. And you'd find that from like talking to the staff. I think we'll be more worried about like, probably like the number one thing that keeps me up at night is this dynamic of like, a lot of the people who were at Parsley in the early joined the company to like create a product that was useful for the market and like kind of from nothing, and discover like sort of those market needs and then evolve them in like a really rapid way. And I fear now that a lot of come to Parsley work for maybe more careerist reasons, and maybe that's okay, right? But like they're kind of coming because the company is already established, already has 400 customers and like notoriety and whatever else. And like, they're not really here for those kind of foundational reasons. Sometimes wonder if like, basically the thing in the back of my head is like, to what degree is the big company mentality that I tried to get away from when I started the company now infiltrating my company years later, right? So that's probably like the biggest sort of thing that spins the wheels in my head from like a concern or a fear standpoint. But yeah, just to learn. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. I think the fact that you can say that you feel like you nailed culture at Parsley might actually be a great, great place for us to start, because I think it's fascinating. That is in many ways, and it was echoed here a little bit today, one of the biggest challenges I think we face as leaders. And so would love to hear at some point your thoughts on that. I'm going to really quickly share a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know, who I am and who this strange person is who's been organizing, the Hangout and running the water cooler. So I'm Claire Liu, and I'm the CEO of Know Your Company. Our software helps managers become better and get employee feedback. And as I mentioned earlier, before we kicked everything off, that we started the water cooler because we just felt like there wasn't a place where you could actually talk about leadership that wasn't expensive, that you could do a few minutes here and there, and that you could connect with from people all over the world. So it is so neat almost a year later to see how many conversations have been had, thousands and thousands of conversations. We have about 1,000 members from all over the world, and to hear and learn from amazing, talented people like all of you. For myself, I am, what am I, Team Crunchy or Team Smooth? That is, it depends on the day, honestly. That's actually why I like to ask this question. So I'm always curious where people land. And then in terms of my biggest challenge lately, the big thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and that I actually am about to start writing a little bit more about, is the problem of, as a leader, making decisions all the time that people aren't always going to agree with, obviously. And how do you negotiate the need to have people excited, high morale, and invested in where the company is going, where the product's going, et cetera, when you as a leader are making decisions that they don't necessarily agree with? So the question of buy-in, the question of communicating those decisions, and it's sometimes maybe you making decisions where you don't maybe necessarily agree with it, but you're letting the person take the lead on it. And so how do you distinguish between all of those paths? That's something I've been chewing on lately. So that's a little bit about me. But we have about here 20 or so minutes to really dive into one particular challenge. And like I said, this Hangout is new. So I really want to sort of open it up and let folks, if there was anything in particular that really resonated with you that one of the other members talked about, if you have a particular question, there's a challenge you want to dive into first, I sort of want to open up the floor for that discussion.
I think I like the idea point about culture, like whether you're running a single person company and you're scaling to 70 or going to a large corporate, like with 10,000, 20,000 employees. One of the things that comes around this culture is a lot of people talk about culture fitness. Like you're hiring someone for culture fitness and defining culture. This is our culture. It would be interesting to understand from each one of you about what you see as culture. What is culture to you, to the type of organizations that you have created or you belong to? And I think it will be a very interesting perspective to also bring in general, like in your day-to-day understanding of how you see culture in your own organizations. I think it would be an interesting start. But I'm open to like any other suggestions if you may have.
I think it's a really interesting point, Vivek. Actually, I mean, for me, that's exactly the problem that we're really wrestling with. And so my current thinking on it, it always seems to evolve, but my current thinking on it is that what's important to us is value fit. So we want people who share the same core values that we do. And so what we're trying to do is find a balance between diversity. So that means culturally, they don't have to be like an optimist. They don't have to be, someone who comes in every day and is super smiley. They have to share our values around honesty and transparency and empathy. Those things are deal breakers for us. So what we're trying to do is look at someone who fits our values, but who we think can add to our culture. Because what we find is actually having those different views, having some people who are sort of glasses half full, then it allows us to see things from different perspectives, and we make decisions overall. The mistake I think we've made is that we haven't made these things explicit in the way that we think about roles, the way that we hire, the way that we interview, the way that we onboard, the way that we performance manage and try and grow people. And so now we've got a bit of a disconnect where we've got people who are established and now we're trying to roll values out and we're saying, well, actually they're not 100% with some of those values. But that's a tricky conversation because we hired them and now we're saying, actually, we kind of want you to be a little bit different there. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting, and it kind of ties into. So I have a little bit of the opposite problem. So we have this really robust and manual, but it works really well for culture fit in our hiring process. But the problem is that my legacy team wasn't hired that way. Mm. So even though they were a part in that culture and those values, I now have a core legacy group that in step saw what the vision was. We wanted to adopt holacracy. We want certain traits that come with that. You have to have people who are entrepreneurial. You have to have people who divorce their taking things personally, right? So giving feedback, all these things, like, because your role is separate, they're not who you are, right? So it's, and also people who really espouse, progress, not perfection, things like this. So these are all things that we knew that we wanted to have, and we knew we had to have in new hires, scale with holacracy. But finding that the legacy people maybe aren't the right fit. I spend a lot of time working with them one-on-one to coach them. Word coach, but it's true. Like, so I feel it, but from the reverse.
No, I think that's the next step for us, is that, where we commit to a new path and now make some decisions.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually,
does anyone have opinions of what they consider to be a culture or a bad culture?
Yes. So interesting. Thank you very much for bringing it up, Vivek, and for sharing your experiences, Tim and Morgan. It was super interesting to get that in. I was speaking to a startup founder probably 3 or 4 months ago about coming on and potentially doing a little bit of work with company. One of their big challenges was hiring people in reasonably senior roles in a very, very fast growing company. So just for some context, this year they've gone from 25 employees to 150 employees. Next year they're going to double in size, and same again the year after. So they're on this massive sort of hiring curve, and their lead time for talent, so if they were to, and I'm talking sort of senior, mid to senior level talent, so if they were to hire a head of product development, growth strategy, thing like that, those jobs was somewhere between 12 and 18 months. And to have those jobs unfilled for 12 to 18 months just seems insane. Like, it seems absolutely crazy. And I was sort of trying to unpick what some of the issues behind that might have been. And one thing he stuck and I wanted to explore it a little bit more, and he was saying, we're a young, fast moving company, and I get really concerned, and it was quite heartened, Tim, whenever you said that you were trying to consider more diversity within your culture, because I think sometimes people can use culture as a bit of an escape for bringing their own implicit bias into situations. So what he meant really when he was saying we're a young company is everyone is under 35. And actually, that's probably not a great situation to be in, especially if you're talking about a company that at the end of next year is 350 staff. To not have one employee that's over 35, you're probably actually jeopardizing the in many sense. So I think that there are sometimes with culture, there's these sort of hard markers, and I would see that as something like an age criteria or experience level criteria, something that's a definite hard marker that someone can identify, actualize, put their hands on, touch, and identify really clearly. And I think that a lot of the time, actually, those things are unhelpful. I think what's really helpful in defining culture are these sort of softer markers. We're looking for things like learning, and the difficulty with that is that sometimes those softer markers are harder to identify, especially in that sort of attract recruit board stage. They only really begin to come into their own whenever you're in the develop or maintain stage of that sort of recruitment with them. But I think really getting clear on what the soft markers of your culture, or what the soft markers of a healthy culture are, is something that's really, really important, and can actually against those hard markers that are maybe going to be unhelpful or could lead to, an undiverse talent population, something like that.
Mm-hmm. That's
actually
interesting.
I can add. So in our company, this culture, and so I think the way we agreed to define it was what kind of decisions we tolerate and what kind of behaviors we encourage, what kind of behaviors discourage. Like that's what defines our culture, and it keeps changing with every person we hire, right? So everybody brings something to the table, and it just dynamics of the overall team in a like it pulls in one direction than the other. So that is one constant change that is happening. So hiring, we try to explain them what are the kind of processes we follow, not just the tech, but even the otherwise. Like we have these open feedback sessions where the floor is open in the team, and we just talk about what are the things which everybody is doing well, or some areas of improvement. So that's pretty open. Like we get into, and people get into a room and talk about each individual, and nobody carries anything negative about that, right? So we talk about these practices to make a hire, and we explain them. We call them over to office probably for a couple of hours. So we have lunch served at office, make them have lunch at office, and probably get a feel of how we work and how we talk during our stand-ups, and it gets a chance to evaluate for them also, so that so the evaluation is mutual. So we evaluate for that, we'll be able to comfortably work with that person, and even if that person also feeling this. So I think that long term, especially inviting them over for lunch, it makes them feel a little more relaxed also, and I think it worked out well for us.
Fantastic.
Actually, to go back to your point, Andrew, about culture, one of the things, particularly in the startup mode, one of the things we were always very conscious of was, were we requiring extraordinary effort from people? You know, working in a co-working space, you'd see a lot of the other companies there, and you know, they're hiring people and they're trying to work, you know, 12-hour days or their weekends, and that's often glorified, particularly in the startup community. And you know, I'm a bit older, so, you know, hopefully some life perspective, and so for us, that was always something we were actively trying to, like, that was a barometer for us. When we stop that, we eliminate the idea that you had to be able to work outside of normal hours, or you had to put in this massive effort in order to get the job done. And so when I'm looking at other companies, for me, that's diversity is a big one, and you know, the mix of people that's there, and the other big one is this, how much is this sort of hard or superhuman sort of rock star sort of thing? How much is that glorified?
Yeah, we really we try really hard to really beat that into people in a good way, and you know, the work-life balance, the productivity, and I actually have our CEO do the part of the onboarding, the onboarding team, because he's a super good example of that. Like, and having on an onboarding video call with people who are, you know, at whatever now contribute to the team, see that, I think really, really helps. So we make the point that, you know, that on the weekends, just because we work asynchronously doesn't mean like you need to manage your Slack. Don't let it manage you. Like, our parameter notifications are off. Like, those shouldn't be, you know, like, you should be going into it rather than the technology bossing you. And it's, if you really need to, then put in keywords, you know, like I think that we've grown, I've actually had to put those into the handbook. Like, these are our best practices. This is how we set this stuff up. And we're really serious about this. And if you don't do it, then people, I think, especially in the first 90 days, they think they have to do the 12-hour plus days to be able to impress people. And we aren't, that's not right.
Yeah.
It's about what you can deliver. So we have to be careful about that. We're actually walking.
What also changes is as the size of an organization changes. Like, suppose you have a small knit cuts this whole company, and the type of behaviors. Like, I really liked Prabodh's points. Right, the type of celebration is needed at certain point of time, it just becomes chaotic and scalable enough. I want to bring different people in. And I think what happens that these people who are the initial setup are required to create these new teams that they're hiring, the new people they're hiring. It becomes a very interesting problem for them. Like, I exhibit a certain kind of behavior which works for me, set of people and the problems that we are solving, and suddenly I need to bring in new people. I look at the same measurement I have. That doesn't work. And I think evolving that culture and then looking at retrospectively identifies this bad or good culture difference for you. Like, you look back 3 years back, where was your organization? What kind of people, what kind of things that you celebrate? Okay, yeah, that was a bad culture for us. That and when I look at from this vantage point, and I think it's very relative to where you are in your organization and the system. But I think it's too central. It's also very difficult to kind of put it in real to someone, say, hey, this is a thing that we are really doing. And I think what also helps is exemplifying these behaviors, making sure that you are walking the talk and not just putting posters about this is your culture, but actually ensuring you see something good, you call out and you say, okay, this is how the example of how I want my team and everyone in the team to exhibit. However, one of the interesting points that comes from my experience was people coming with general curiosity analyze that as a right culture for us. And I think we allow this whole retrospective behavior for people to come in and say, okay, it is that, why is it needed? What is helping us? I think this is a great behavior to also celebrate, and you can look back at your own culture and say, well, it makes sense now in this context, in this type of problem space that we are working in.
Yeah.
Just maybe then, but it now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this conversation is amazing. We are already approaching on our hour here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. The last sort of thought, though, that I wanted to share is just some of the perspectives that we've gained in studying and researching culture for the past 4 or 5 years, which is, in terms of how you define it, those behaviors as, Prabodh, what you were saying of, the things you do and you don't do, absolutely. That's what you have to judge at the end of the day. It's not the posters or what are seen as artifacts. It's not even the things that you say, which are seen as espoused values and beliefs. It's actually the basic underlying assumptions for what people have. It's that last layer of what people actually do and they don't do. And just making sure that that's what you want your culture to be. Now, to this bigger question, though, of, well, how do you know if your culture is bad or good, or what makes a bad culture and a good culture? Is there sort of any objective thought around that? And, Vivek, you're saying it's very relative to team size, to where you are in the company's trajectory. And I think the thing that I always think a lot about when it comes to culture is, at the end of the day, culture in itself, or let me back up, organizations and businesses in particular are extremely different than, say, countries or families or cultures and other groupings of people, which is that in a business, the goal is to actually get something done. And so your culture is actually serving this purpose to help your business, to help your team actually accomplish a goal. It serves that greater purpose. And so to answer the question of what is a good culture and a bad culture, I think it's tying it directly to, well, what is your business trying to get done? And I don't mean just in terms of hitting revenue numbers or a certain number of customers to be served, but I mean in terms of, well, what kind of business do you want to be? Do you want to be one that lasts a long time? Do you want to be one that delivers a high quality product? Do you want to be one where customers are happy? And I think the reason why that's so important to reinforce when thinking about culture is because it can be very easy to start thinking about culture as, are people happy, right? Which is a good thing to ask. I think asking about happiness is important. I mean, if you go to my Twitter bio, it says my mission in life is to help people be happier at work. Trust me, I'm all about happiness. But I think it can be very easy to have that definition of happiness become warped by a founder's whim of, well, these are the things that make me happy, so a good culture is this because it makes me happy, right? Or it's very easy for culture to become, this set of employees, I need to make them happy, so I'm going to change the culture or change our policies or have actions be a certain way because of this. And those employees might not be the right employees you want to make happy, right? Maybe those are employees you shouldn't have hired in the first place. So those are the wrong employees to make happy. So I think with culture, it's very easy to get lost in, how do we just make everyone feel good? How do we make things feel good? Instead of thinking about tying it to, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish as an organization, and tying it to those bigger goals, and that it's this tool and it serves to help move the organization forward. So so those are my thoughts here. I feel like, by the way, we could talk about this for another, good few hours. It's been an amazing conversation so far. But again, I promised everyone for this first one we would do just an hour just to experiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this recording with all of our members. I'll post it in the water cooler. And if you feel like you have so much more to talk about, what I would love is, feel free to connect directly with maybe one or two of the other members. Feel free to jump on the phone, get on a Google Hangout, or start a thread in the water cooler based off of one of these conversations. So what is a bad and good culture? Or, what is the challenge that you face with actually having a manual, but having people who you hired who now don't follow the culture manual, or the opposite problem? And I'd love to continue this dialogue, because I think aside from just us here on this Hangout, that we'll actually learn a lot more and get a lot of input from the other almost 1,000 members by sharing some of these conversations. So I think that's it for today, though. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've had a blast.
Thanks so much, Juneja. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Claire.
Absolutely. Hope to talk to you soon, and see you in the water cooler. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Nice.